Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of I've Got Questions, a Premodern podcast. We are continuing our retrospective of PSS season number 5, and today we have the head honchos, the godfathers, whatever names you want to put in. I know they're not fond of the princes, so we're going to stay away from that. But we have Michael Heup and Flint Espil with us today. How you guys doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having us tonight, Will.
Also doing well. Hoyp, as just a little factoid, he actually likes being called
Yeah,
the
I
Prince
was
in
gonna say like
Premodern. So you're
Oh,
good.
I
You're
thought.
good.
Okay, so it's a split here. So Hoyp can be the prince, and then I'm going to call Flynn. I'm just going to call you the Don. How about that? Somewhere in there. Don, okay? We
Let's
need a
not get
nickname.
crazy. Let's not get crazy with the monikers. I'll allow it. I'll allow it.
Okay, fair enough, fair
Yeah.
enough. But guys, we just last week wrapped up PSS season 5, and it was a really great season. A lot. I will try to keep it down. Thank you very much. Go ahead. Yeah. As always, everybody in the audience, my children float around in the background. So there's your entertainment for the day. Um, so the PSS season 5 was great. Got to be a participant. I was honored to do so. It was fantastic to have the experience. Everybody enjoys watching it. And what we want to do now is we've been doing retrospectives with everybody, and we want to kind of get the background feel with you guys, what went into it, your thoughts during the event, to kind of fill out that circle. Michael Heup will be back very shortly. Um, and there's two of you now. Can you hear me, Michael?
yeah, my phone just said that it recommended that I reconnect. So
Okay, sounds good. Well, we're gonna figure out in post how this is all gonna look. That's awesome. But so going into first question is going into a season like PSS or going into a PSS, how do you guys select and go through and make choices on who is going to participate? So however you guys want to answer.
Have you seen the South Park episode with the manatees?
I have not actually.
Oh, okay, that's pretty much it. But since the joke didn't land,
You
I
tried
guess
though.
I guess I'll start us out. So we usually start talking about it um, pretty far in advance and just kind of thinking through what we want the theme of the series to be if we're going to do a theme. Most of them have been just pretty like spiky competitive, honestly, since the second one. And then we start thinking a little bit about whom we might invite, and Mike can talk a little bit about the criteria that go into that. But and then as we have more and more conversations and start to figure out who we're actually going to invite and when we're going to do it, then we will typically go into any sort of nuances that we might have for the series.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like the selection criteria that we use, Mike, and some
yeah,
other
I,
ones.
I can just talk. I mean, like it's changed a little bit throughout since like Premodern has come a little bit more established. But basically, we want someone that has made some contribution to the community or has performed well in some number of tournaments or has a voice in the community. Um, we do also look to see beyond just the United States if there's someone that could be featured. We do know a lot of people always clamor for like European, but given our schedule constraints, that's not typically not realistic. But we have been able to get some players from South America, which is really cool. Since pre-modern is really global, and we like to include people from all different places. So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
basically just someone who's contributed, performed, or has just demonstrated a skill or a love for pre-modern is kind of what we look for.
Awesome, awesome. So those of you looking to work your way into this conversation, there are your steps. And Premodern can always use any voice, all voices, all experiences, and all perspectives. So that's really awesome to hear. That's how it's done. I would agree that it would be awesome to get some more people from Europe in, but those time constraints are just so brutal. So I hope those in Europe do understand, or maybe if you're reached out to, knowing that if you're in Europe, you may have to be up at 2 a.m. in the morning. I don't know. I don't know what to have. But it was awesome to see those that having Alvaro this year. Was it? I can never pronounce his name. Was it Christian last
Christian
year?
Weisner.
Yep,
Yeah, it was Christian.
having him last year as well. It's really awesome because Premodern has become much more global. So when you decided your lineup today or for this series, did you decide the lineup first and then that it was going to be spiky, or did you know it was spiky going into it?
We knew it was spiky before the people that we asked. Because I think
Got
if we uh, wanted a different theme or goal, then we
hmm
might have asked different people. So yeah, we kind of have an idea of what we're looking for before we ask the people.
exactly. And that seems to be the way. And as I've done this retrospective and gathering people's opinions and kind of watching chat, it seems like people enjoy the more competitive atmosphere for PSSs as far as more spiky decks versus more, saucy decks and all that. Is that your general reception as well, what you've picked up on? Or have you gotten other opinions that weigh on your mind?
Um, yeah, I think so. Yeah. So if we rewind way back to the genesis of the series, it was
Mm-hmm.
really about us creating more pre-modern content because in those days, there really wasn't a whole lot compared to now, and we wanted more videos that people could watch. We wanted to bring the community together, and we really wanted to showcase the format and get the decks out there and give people, sort of the pre-modern experience. And when we did the second series, I mean, I don't even think Survival of the Fittest wasn't elves when we did the second series. You can correct me on that, Hoyp.
I
Um,
definitely know it wasn't in the first one. So
it definitely wasn't in the first one, and it wouldn't have been in the second one because elves wouldn't have been a deck. But I don't. It may have even predated that. But we wanted to bring together people on the brewing side of the community as well because the first one
hmm
was spicier, and so we're like, yeah, let's have a spice kind of series. Let's see what people can come up with, and maybe some of those ideas or parts of those ideas will stick and
hmm
create additional deck ideas. And we did it, and it was fun, but I think for a lot of viewers, it kind of got old after a little bit because it was like, all right, we kind of saw this deck do its thing, and there were
hmm
some lopsided matches, and some decks really just didn't work out, and so
hmm
we had feedback from people saying that maybe it wasn't quite as engaging as the first series, and at
Okay.
that point, Premodern was starting to grow even more when we did the third series, and so we're like, you know what, let's keep the competitive side of things. It seems to be more engaging for viewers. It seems to be more engaging for the hosts. And we've kind of stuck to our guns since then.
yeah, I'll just
Gotcha.
kind of add and Flint kind of just touched on it, but it was easier for Flint and I to stay interested and excited about the more traditional spiky format. We just felt a
hmm
little bit more invested in that. That's kind of the pre-modern that we typically enjoy, and so it's just easier, I think, to make a production on something that you are more invested in. And so we thought that our quality would be better if it is more traditional. That spiky feel as compared to the creative brew one that we did in season 2.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So going into this season in comparing to others from outside looking in, there were a couple of unique things that both were incorporated and then also just seemed to happen during the course of this. First off, let's kind of talk the deck format as far as each week what could be played. Traditionally, you guys did the banning of decks. Ban deck a week, pick out of the two, etc. This time, the change was it's going to be a rotation. Essentially, it's like 3 seasons in there. You play all 3 decks, reset, play all three. You can choose whatever deck you want. What inspired you guys to go in that direction in comparison to previous years?
So the main focus was uh, from what we had done previously. We kind of looked back, and there were a number of times, I guess, if someone, I'll just use Rich Shea as an example. If Rich Shea has brought Parfait in his lineup, which he's likely to do, that's what he's known for. But then the problem is if everyone fears playing against Rich Shea in a Parfait deck and it gets banned every week, as a viewer, it's kind of a letdown because you're like, oh, well, I want to see Rich play his deck that he's known for, that he's a master at, that he's refined, that he knows inside and out. And if you have the ban format, I mean, like, you can't fault any of the players for banning that because
Right.
it might be the strategic best choice. Um, but as a viewer, we could see how that would be frustrating. And then, okay, well, there are 3 decks, but if in actuality it's closer to 2, could we do anything to provide a little more variety for the viewer? That was the
Gotcha.
original intent, I guess. So
Gotcha. That makes sense. Flint, was that kind of in line what you were thinking of as well for rotating through the decks? Just trying to give of the viewer the chance to see all decks involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we accomplished that goal very, very well, right? I mean, I just
Mm-hmm.
listened to the pod with Alvaro where, he brought 3 decks that he's well known for and he got to showcase all 3 of them, right? So, from the
Exactly.
perspective of accomplishing what we set out to do, I think we absolutely did. Now, there was some hubbub in terms of, the players and some of the viewers about the system. But I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Is that how we're going to do it
Mm-hmm.
moving forward? Maybe, maybe not. But we got to see everybody play all of their decks. Granted, it
Mm-hmm.
did create some really lopsided situations with the fluctuator
No.
deck, as you well
No, it
know,
didn't.
and some
No.
other ones,
They're all
right?
fair. Yeah, yeah.
So did we really get to see that deck do its thing? Maybe, maybe not. But in general, right, we got to see
Mm-hmm.
everybody play their decks. We didn't get, any decks, constantly banned every week. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it was largely a success. And is it as intricate as the ban system? Yeah, maybe not. But there were still a lot of hard decisions that players had to make, and I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
you can speak to that.
I mean, I'll just
Absolutely.
add. I mean, like, if we were to do something like that in the future, it might just impact the decks that the players bring in. Instead of bringing something like Fluctuator that has a super polarizing matchups, you bring
Mm-hmm.
3 decks that are more consistent, so that you don't have that bad feeling, and you feel like, okay, no matter what week I place this deck in, it has a good shot. So, I mean, like,
Absolutely.
it is unfortunate for you, Will, because you were part of the learning experience, and but I could see that, like, if we were to just do the same thing again, with a little bit more information from the players, like, it might just change their deck selection so that they avoid those kind of swingy matchups. So
Absolutely. And for my part, I don't think I took any sort of real issue with it. Um, One, because Fluctuator, when I chose it, I thought it was a good deck. I wanted a combo deck in the arsenal. Absolutely. Hey there, Flint. But I went into it, and this is something I'll talk about when I talk about my experience personally. Is I picked up on a lot of things in this PSS as far as learning lessons, and one of those lessons in brief was like, don't bring decks to things you aren't comfortable with, and I was not comfortable with Fluctuator. So what I did do is this system almost worked in theory to an advantage. What I was trying to do eventually is I was using Fluctuator more as like, this is my big stick. You can't do this because I bring this. And I knew once I started doing that strategy, my week threes in each were going to be very bad. Because it would usually line up with Dreadnought. Granted, I probably should have brought Fluctuator versus Jeff when I played him week 4, but I chickened out. But that is going back to outside of me. Probably the only complaint about the system I've gotten from people I talked to wasn't necessarily that a rotation is bad, that showcasing deck was bad. It just made week 3 feel almost dull, might be the word, because it was predetermined. So I think where I'm currently, and I'd love your opinion, is I think there's a system in which we do this rotation, because I think that's really good. I want all the decks showcased, but maybe there's something like, can you somehow pick 4 decks and like, so what could be done to make week 3 not feel as predetermined, if that makes sense. And if I had to narrow down one thing I've heard, that's probably the biggest thing, is how do we make that week 3 feel less predetermined and a little bit more excitement to it. So whatever any responses you guys have to that or thoughts to that commentary, I just that was one reason I want to do this cast, is to share all the perspectives I get to see this is what it is, and get your guys' perspective.
Flint, do you want to go or do you want to be?
I would just tell the players to be smarter about it, so they don't feel so trapped.
I love it. I absolutely
Go ahead,
love
Mike.
I guess I can see it from a player's perspective that it feels duller, but like from a viewer, I don't necessarily even feel like that's the case. Like it might even be
Sure.
more exciting because the week that you know that Rich is going to play his parfait, well, maybe that's a bad example because then that I don't know that you could just see the person playing their flagship deck. You know, if like in week 3, if you know that they're going to play, you're like, oh, I'm going to make sure I'm going to tune in then. And like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I guess I don't see it as such a downside. I guess as kind of how
Sure.
you presented it. I can understand as a player participating in a PSS that it is less appealing. I don't know if I agree as a viewer that it loses a lot of makes the third every third week less appealing. So
Okay. I think that argument is just fair as well. And as I said, I tried to use it to where I knew what I was going to do and hopefully get an edge in those other 2 weeks. Didn't quite work out that way, but we tried. So kind of moving forward from that, we had an initial lineup, and I can't imagine this is a problem to say, but Francisco Pavlush, F. Pavlush from MTGO was initially part of this event. He had to back out. So with that happening, and I'm hoping I see Francisco in the next one. Fingers crossed that it works out. But how did you guys go about picking a replacement for that one? Was it pretty simple? Did you have a list made up like here's number 9 and 10 if something were to happen? Um, how did you guys go about doing that?
do you want to jump on this?
Yeah, I can fill this one. Um, we asked Martin Berlin first, and he was really busy. So
Mm-hmm.
um,
You tried though.
we tried. No, we we had already considered asking Lanny to the next series because of his contributions to the format, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I had even told him at LobsterCon that we were going to ask him to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so after sort of the winner of our last series, you know, whoever was going to win the series, he was going to be next on our list to ask because obviously he's done a lot with format. Obviously, there's the podcast out and everything now.
Mm-hmm.
Puts a lot of time and effort into it, and he does well. And so he seemed like an obvious kind of shoe in when Francisco wasn't able to do it. And so
Mm-hmm.
Mike and I chatted about it briefly, just made sure we were on the same page. And then I sent him a message and just said, "Hey, can you let us know by this date?" Because it was getting very close to the time when we were going to start. All the deck lists had already
Mm-hmm.
been submitted, and we give people a couple of months to build their decks, to play test, to
Mm-hmm.
get cards they need, and so that time had largely come and gone, and we were getting down to the wire, and we have a pretty tight schedule. As
Mm-hmm.
you know, even
Mm-hmm.
as we tried to schedule the semifinals and the finals, and so
Mm-hmm.
I asked Lanny, and I was just like, "Hey, can you let me know by this day?" And he's like, "Absolutely." He got back to me quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and I waited to share the deck lists, obviously, from the series until he had
Mm-hmm.
submitted his, and then brought him onto the Google Sheet so he could see everything else. Brought him into the group chat, and
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, it all worked out. But we were scrambling there for a little bit for sure.
Yeah. Well, you guys definitely covered it well. And Lanny's a great addition. Obviously, a great player. Ended up taking full advantage of the opportunity that was presented. Another little thing to talk about for the format that I don't know if you guys made clear on commentary. I cannot remember, but there was a point of deck building is you could not have the same engine powering multiple decks. So you could not have the land tax engine in multiple decks. Mike Arnold, I think, famously wanted to do Panza, Panza, Panza of various colors. I think that was Mike Arnold who said he had wanted to do that. Where I think I think that was a really good idea. Had there been any PSSs where you saw the same engines or powerful cards in all decks? Was that something you were trying to correct, or just something you were trying to maybe codify more into, like, this is how we want it to be kind of going forward?
Yeah, I know the first one didn't really have that rule. I think we always jokingly call it the Robin rule because Robin Lund had brought, I think all three of his decks had like 4 duress, 4 Cabal Therapy. And
Ah,
while I don't know if that I would argue that that's an engine, but it was something that was present. And I think the idea was just to, um, like when you have a competition, people are going to try and like some people, you can't fault them for like min maxing. And one
mm-hmm.
strategy would be, okay, I'm going to bring 3 combo decks or 3, we'll say engine decks or whatever. And so basically it could make like a prisoner's dilemma is like, well, especially with the ban system is like, I can't get rid of this and I'm going to be at
Mm-hmm.
a disadvantage no matter what. So I think that
Right.
was usually like the intention. And then also like a byproduct of that is in theory, it should provide more variety if you're saying, okay, you have to have different engines. And so there would be less
Okay.
deck overlap between a player. And then also it's less likely between actual opponents so that you don't have a bunch of mirror matches. Um, that was the idea, I guess, basically. And um, I mean, I'm sure it comes into play somewhat often for someone
Mm-hmm.
who's like participating in. They'd be like, oh, maybe I would actually want to do this, but like play elves and full English breakfast, but I can't because they're both like survival decks. Um,
Gotcha.
we just felt like it was better for the production to kind of implement that rule.
And I liked it. I liked that it forces the diversity. I'm all for things like, if it ever happened, if there was like a pick your 3 decks, but it's unified rules for what you have to do. Like, I'm all for sort of things like that that make you have to. You can still be competitive, but do unique things, and they're not all on the same axis. So I really enjoy things like that. So let's say, so we've come up to week 1. We got everything locked in. All our decks are there. We hit week 1. I know for me, this was my first PSS. I was nervous in my first game. I was nervous. I had sweaty palms. I had all of that. It was a big thing for me. Have Is there any nerves for you guys as putting it on in that first week of like, let's make sure this goes well. Let's do all that. Is there, or are you guys kind of over that at this point because you've done it a fair few times now?
I feel like this is a better question for Mike because I'm involved in a lot of the prep and everything and getting everything
Mm-hmm.
set up, getting the avatars made, selecting the players, reaching out, coordinating. But Mike does all the production stuff. So like when it's time to go, it's really on him. So I'll let you step in for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's like a little bit of nerves only because it's like there's usually a break between like the last time that I've streamed and like the PSS, and it's kind of like I'm just like afraid that I'm gonna like forget to do something or like
Mm-hmm.
I have some. There's been times that like I change my OBS scenes and I'm like, oh, I think I've had certain things muted on there or didn't add like my microphone on it on certain scenes and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. I've had those issues, and I guess there's a little bit of that. That would be the most like nervousness, I guess, that I experience at this point. So there, yeah, it's a little bit of that. And I mean, I think it's pretty common of anyone who like makes their own productions is they're pretty particular about their own quality. They don't like making those kind of mistakes, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the closest, I guess, to having nerves. But I mean, a lot of times it's just like I'm usually by like week 1, I'm really excited like to get things going. I usually do a decent amount of preparation, and there's some amount of anticipation, and it's usually more of excitement than nerves. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So one of the unique features of this is that the players themselves aren't just playing; they are commentating. Um, and some of the things you hear um, from that are like sometimes you'll hear people say that the commentator doesn't understand the matchup, or why are they commentating if they didn't have play the matchup. I don't agree with that because most of the players within this have a general understanding of most things that they're seeing. Is it every intricate thing? No, but you can usually catch the gist of what's going on, and the surprise factor of seeing something you're not expecting is real. That adds to things. What has your guys' thoughts been towards just having both your commentaries and also having guests on, and sometimes when maybe a guest or even yourselves haven't played a matchup, or the matchup is, I think there was a Flores BK match from last year that I think was like 5 million hours long, in which there were numerous non-magic subjects discussed. What are your guys' thoughts on the commentary for this, and all the things that go into that? Any shortcomings? Any real good positives? What are your thoughts?
I have a couple.
Okay.
There are a few things that I think are great about it. I think having the players do commentary is nice because I'm on Pacific time and technically I'm still working when we start. So we moved from a 2 night a week, 2 matches per night, to a 1 night a week, 4 matches. And in order to make it work for most people's schedules, we have to start when we start. And I'm still at work, so I can't do commentary. So we've got to find someone else. And I think it's a nice opportunity for the players. The second thing that I appreciate about it is it's a nice opportunity for them to get to talk a little bit about their impressions, especially since they're in the series. They might have some insights about if they've played the match before. These are also players who are pretty active in Premodern, right? It's one of the criteria that we use to invite players. And so they're going to very likely have a perspective on the matchup in some capacity as well. So it just adds to the richness of the commentary itself. And then briefly, just to touch on the other thing about, a concern about whether or not we have played the matchup or haven't, or if we know the lands or we don't. There are some matchups that I think we get the gist of, and there might be some that are a little more nuanced. And in those moments, there's the opportunity for us to be surprised as well, which I think is part of the fun, right? So if Rich Shea takes a line that other people weren't expecting and were surprised by it, I think that adds to the entertainment value. I also think it adds to the entertainment value when Mike and I talk about push-up lizards or other things, and we get great feedback from other people. So you can't please everyone all the time with all of the commentary that you do, but it seems like we have a good enough mix, I would say, to where people continue to watch it and be excited about it. And ultimately, you will sort of get out of it whatever it is you're looking for.
Yeah. Okay. Mike,
I'll just echo a lot of those things. I mean, I think initially the change was more of a scheduling thing, like Flint had mentioned, but it kind of like looked at it as kind of like, well, we have all these talented pre-modern players, and like this is like a perfect opportunity for them to kind of have a chance to show their prowess and like jump in a booth and get a different perspective. I mean, like I don't know how many times like Flint and I have talked about like the Sly versus Landstill matchup or something, but I'm sure every time we do it, we say some things that we will say every time. And just if you switch up your partners, that dynamic kind of changes a little. Like just the way you cover that match would change a little. So that variety is also nice. But yeah, I mean, I don't. I mean, I don't think anyone expects us to like. I mean, I played a lot of pre-modern, and I mean, I think all the people in the PSS also have. And if we haven't played all the matchups, like I don't know who they're expecting that has. It's not like I don't know what the expectation is in that sense, and so I'm not going to say that I'm perfect in every aspect. And I make certain things that at one point I'm thinking one thing and it doesn't come out well, or I make a weird observation or whatnot. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that's fine. I don't I don't see a solution to that. So
gotcha. That makes sense to me. So then we
can't hear you, Will.
You can't hear me now?
I don't know. All the audio sources have changed for Will. All right, I'll talk a little bit more while he figures that out. But I mean, a lot of the times when I talk about commentary, like if a match goes long, then we'll usually derail a little bit and try and talk about something. And a lot of times, I think those are almost the more memorable things. Like even before Flynn had brought it up, the push-up lizard was something that I remember. Or I remember just one time we were just talking about like drafting pre-modern players for a sports team or something. Like if we were just going to play a pickup football game or something, like who would you want?
There's a lot of tall people in pre-modern. I think volleyball. We talked about Robin Lund, and other people are like, "Ooh, yeah, first pick Robin Lund."
Yeah, or just if it's like random Wisconsin-isms since Flint has lived here um, for a while,
Oh yeah.
or used to live here for a while, and so um, yeah, I mean, like that's not what we go out and set out to do to make those conversations, but when they happen organically, I think it's interesting, and it kind of brings the community a little bit closer together when they can kind of share those like little tidbits or memories with us and together. So okay.
All right, guys. Sorry for if you see a blip in our little communications. My audio sucked. So here we are back again, ready to get at it. So we were in week one. We were talking commentators. Mike Flint, you both had great points that I agree with. Most everybody was knowledgeable about what was going on. It adds to some flavor if exciting things happen. So I'm definitely there. So after week one, things were going hunky dory. Everything was fine. And then Mr. Berlin, Mr. Berlin, he decided to make an announcement that land tax was banned. At that point, when you guys heard, what was your reaction? And specifically, reaction to, the PSS has land tax decks in it. And what was the thought going through your guys' minds?
I mean, I don't know if the ban necessarily surprised me since I feel like it was kind of like talked about. I didn't know if it was actually going to happen, and I guess it happened sooner than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, of how it applied to the PSS, uh, we wanted to make a decision that felt fair to the players, but then also considered the audience. So we didn't want to make a decision that would make any of the participants feel slighted in some way. And I guess to expand on that, if I guess one of the things that we propose is that like everyone gets to submit one new deck,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe my reasoning isn't as good given that it wasn't with the ban situation, but in theory you could bring, given that you're expecting some number of people to have parfait, you could in theory try and have three decks that are all good against parfait. Um,
Sure.
and if you just are swapping out one of those, that doesn't really do you any good because parfait no longer would exist, and you're like the 2 of the 3 year decks were like very tuned to it or whatever. That's just the theory. That didn't necessarily feel fair,
Mm-hmm.
and so I didn't have. I felt like the fairest thing was to leave it. And but then the question kind of came to is would would it feel like a lame duck kind of thing where the audience is like, oh, here we're watching land tax decks and it's banned, or people getting confused, and that was a concern. But I mean, a benefit of it knowing that the decks were going to be every third week, you don't have that issue, I guess, of that it if it didn't get banned, like banned in that ban system for the PSS, not talking about
Mm-hmm.
being banned for Premodern. In theory, that deck could be played every week, and then I mean, I would be a little bit more nervous, I guess, if we had the traditional ban system that we had in a previous series. But knowing that we had the rotation, we were kind of like, well, there's two players, they each have it. I mean, like it isn't likely to be like an overwhelming presence, and so I think that kind of made me lean with the idea of, oh, let's just leave the decks as they are. And I mean,
Gotcha.
also as a selfish reason, it would take a decent amount of work just to wait or get everyone to submit a new thing. I had to make new graphics or whatnot, and so
Mm-hmm.
that was a little bit of it. But I'd like to think that the other reasons that I said before were had more weight. So
Absolutely. Flint, any perspective from your end?
Just to add, I would also say that from a pragmatic side, I think I've mentioned this before, but our schedules get
Mm-hmm.
busier and busier as we get into the fall. And the whole idea of starting when we did is so we wouldn't bleed too much into
Mm-hmm.
our busier schedules. And we kind of saw that, our listeners
Mm-hmm.
didn't see that, but in our group chat, it was actually, we had a bit of a challenge, let's say, to schedule our semifinals and final matches.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because we're busy and we get busier. And if we had to postpone and even replay week 1, we really would
Right.
have been pushing it in terms of scheduling. And so there was a kind of a practical reason to it. So y'all got to see Land Tax's Swan Song. People who brought it enjoyed playing it, and some people actually do enjoy playing against it. We saw how things panned out, and
There we
we don't
go.
have to deal with land tax
That
anymore.
is the bottom line right there. So that kind of takes care of the intricacies of things getting set up, things that happen weren't expecting. So now is a great time for each of you to. I can't expect everyone to remember every match from you guys, but what kind of distinct memories, fun moments, really cool moments did you guys take away from the PSS this year?
I'll start with the first match that I remember, and I think it was Rich Shea against Jared. So Rich was playing the Dreadnought deck, and Jared was playing Replenish, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was. I mean, I don't remember what I said. I was probably like, oh, Rich is probably gonna like play the Dreadnought here since if he has like another counter spell or whatever, and then Jared needs to have 2 things in 1 turn or whatever, and only if that happens that Rich would lose. And then Rich just like never plays a Dreadnought for like the entire game, and just like
Yep.
plays like a super, basically like he's a control deck that has a Dreadnought that he's not even planning on using. And I thought that was really interesting. I certainly wouldn't have thought of that, and I would have played that matchup a lot different. And I think Rich is correct in that aspect, and him knowing the deck lists and it can line everything up, and just realizing that he is the control deck in that situation, I thought was really cool. That's the first match that I can think of that stands out in the series. Flint, do you want to progress or move on or comments about that match?
No, I think it's fine to move on. I really liked because I wasn't there for that match anyway, but I did watch it later. I really liked which one was it? It was when
Mm-hmm.
you, Will, played Mike Arnold and he ran
Yes.
Dead Guy L and had all the alternate
Yeah.
cards, and it was just normal for you. You're like, oh yeah, we're just playing Magic here. Yeah, and Mike Arnold, it was so funny because he was messaging me like all of these images of cards when he had ordered them. I'm just getting like all these Discord DMs where it's like, oh, look at this version, look at that version. Who is going to be so good? And then you play, and he brings it up, or we bring it up at the end of the match. You're like, huh?
No clue.
What?
Not a clue. Just it was magic cards to me.
It was like you crushed his dreams. Like, I mean, you beat him, and then you added insult to injury, and you're like, oh, these are just
I did
magic
feel
cards.
bad
What are you
about
talking
that.
about?
I was feeling
that
real
was kind
bad
of
about
amazing.
that after I realized it was like, no. But yeah, that was probably one of my favorite moments of it was that he took the time to play into the fact that I just couldn't give a damn what card I had, and that irritate is probably a strong word sometimes, but maybe it's appropriate here that some people don't enjoy the fact that that's what I do, and I like that he leaned into it. So that was a class act by Mike Arnold. So I think I'm definitely in line with you there, Flint. That was awesome once I figured out what was going on.
Yeah, I think if anybody gets the congeniality award
there
in the
has
series,
to be.
it's definitely Mike Arnold. Like his decks were just like so on point,
and the fact that he had 2 versions of it. By the way,
so yeah,
he played
big fan
his
of that.
version, the bad version with art, and then he
Yeah.
played the regular version the next time he played it. The one with the
Which one's the bad version,
the
Will?
old arts, obviously. Right? Yeah. That's what it is. It's less expensive.
That's what I thought.
Actually, no. His one he played against me is actually probably more expensive than the original art. So that's not even an argument anymore. Because I don't know, that Tainted Pact or whatever he played has to be much more than the originals now. I don't know. But
all I know is I was very thankful that he had a second copy because I know a lot of Magic cards, and the nice thing about Premodern is I pretty much know all the cards. There were a lot of cards I'm like, is that a Case of Colios? Oh, it's just a snow-covered swamp, or it's just a regular swamp, and I was second-guessing myself or asking questions about what cards were played. So that was something that I haven't had to deal with for a while in Premodern, and that was a different challenge that I had faced. So Yeah.
Yeah, I was definitely talked out of playing the Midnight Hunt lands, the black and white lands. I was talked out of doing that, so be
Yeah.
thankful. Be thankful. Yeah. Um, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Any other kind of thoughts? Any matches that stuck out to you guys?
The Jared versus Tom. Jared was playing goblins and Tom was playing the
Mm-hmm.
rock. You had touched on this match more recently with when you did your retrospective with Tom, but um, just that one moment. I mean, the games are pretty swingy and like that pivotal moment, and it was to at Tom's expense. Like he just messed up, and it was just kind of weird, like how the game kind of flipped around and then kind
Mm-hmm.
of things slipped away. But that game sticks out because I mean that whole match was pretty good if I'm remembering correctly, but it kind of hinging on that weird mistake was
Yeah,
really interesting. So
absolutely. Flint, any more things that were stand out to you?
Um, yeah, it's funny because I was actually only commentating for half of
Mm-hmm.
the round robin
Yep.
rounds. I had a very busy travel summer, kind of regardless. Um, and thanks again to the players who stepped in to do extra commentary. Thanks again to BK for stepping in as well. One of those weeks, and I know Flora certainly did some commentary with me later on. But the other match that really stood out to me was actually the semifinals when
Mm-hmm.
Lanny played Jared, and or excuse me, no, it was the
Mm-hmm.
finals actually when Lanny was playing Rich, and he was on replenish, and he just had those
Those were
crazy mocked
disgusting.
diamond hands where it was
Oh
like the
my
turn two
god.
lock or whatever. I was just like,
I just
holy god, like I don't know what he's
uh
bribing the dealer, but like that was amazing. And yeah, I was just blown away. I was yeah, it was crazy to see. I feel kind of bad for Rich, but also
mm-hmm.
like that's the way that it goes sometimes. And I know like I've been on the winning side of hands like
Yeah.
that before, and I've also been on the losing side. But going into that, I was like, all right, this is going to be a pretty interesting match. And it was
Yeah.
like
Couldn't
boom,
draw it up
boom.
better.
So that stands out as well
I
as like as really noteworthy. It
And
was insane.
one thing that kind of these two stories, you notated, Mike, and then Flint, you, is when those blowouts happen. For the most part, and I would say for all of it, outside of little small things and normal feelings of darn that sucked, nobody gets salty during these. Like none of the players, at least outwardly, are getting salty, storming off from a table. It is all very calm. I mean, in talking with Tom, like he definitely had to shake off um that mistake. I admittedly lost my fun in that second part of it. Like I was not having fun because I just couldn't. It did not feel like I could catch a break. But everybody, Rich, with that start, like that couldn't have felt good in a finals to see that happen. But everybody, for the most part, just kept it nice, calm, and collected. Was very respectful, and I think that's been a standout thing of all the PSSs I've watched. Have you guys kind of had that same feeling of the competitors when they've been in there?
yeah, I mean, like I think that's something that comes with. I mean, like, naturally, we try and gravitate towards people in the PSS that play well,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's directly or indirectly. I mean, like if we're looking at someone who has some amount of tournament results, then it's more likely that they're a good player. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think good players understand that there's a certain amount of variance in Magic, and I think they're able
Mm-hmm.
to separate their emotions for while, yeah, especially when the stakes are really high. It sucks that your opponent got really lucky or you got really unlucky, but they're able to understand that that's going to happen sometime, or like my opponent's playing a deck that is more high variance and I just have to accept, yeah, I was on the losing end of it, but there are going to be times where my opponent would lose in certain situations, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
kind of say, yeah, that I mean, like that they understand that's how it works, and they
Mm-hmm.
separate that loss from their emotions, and they don't get upset. And I think I don't think it's a coincidence that um, the people that we select um, have that, because I think it's a sign. I think the better player that you are, the less likely you are to get upset about random variance. So
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It's okay to be upset. I would say it's okay to be disappointed, frustrated, tilted, whatever adjective you want to use here. But what's
Right.
not okay is to be a dick.
You certainly
If I
can.
can say that on this podcast. And if you get salty and you're a jerk about it, like you're probably not going to get an invitation. And if you do it in the PSS, you're probably not going to get an invitation back. Because that's kind of the other piece to this is, we really love the pre-modern community. We love the people who are the most competitive. We love the people who are the least competitive and spiciest of all, right? But the one thing that I think stands out to us in this community is just how cool everybody typically is. We always talk about,
Yep.
the take backsies and how many is appropriate to allow in pre-modern. And the very fact that we even have that conversation is a wonderful hallmark of the community, I think. But if someone was a dick about it, I would have been shocked because I think informally there is a certain pedigree of character that we expect from the people that we
I'll
invite
just
into
kind of
space.
add, it kind of has to deal with like production. I mean, because we do post game interviews, and if we're afraid that that someone's just not going to be able to have a conversation because they're upset about how the match went, that's going to make things more difficult. And I think it's probably something that most Magic players can relate. That if there's been times that when they win a match, and then the conversation after that match, like, because I mean, after you win, you typically don't want to ask questions about like, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Because it's usually kind of pushing something on like someone who might be upset. I'm sure you've all been in that situation. It's like the
Yep.
conversation is very different, but like the times that if I mean, I don't know if everyone does this. I try to, but like if I do lose, I try and engage in conversation or like open it up because then the conversation is more natural. Because like when that player has beaten me, they might be uncomfortable talking about certain things because they're afraid they're rubbing it in or bringing up
Yeah.
a sore subject. But as soon as I start talking about it as the person who lost, then it's a lot easier to have that conversation. And we want people that are going to be able to communicate after a loss. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes 100% sense, and that's something I've, as a Magic player, sometimes struggled with. I definitely kind of struggled with it a little bit. I don't think I let anything out, but I definitely, going into that tail end, that second set of matches where it just was kind of rough, I definitely think I expressed more disappointment than I wanted to. And it's another one of those lessons to learn is like, sometimes happens and just let it be. You don't have to win everything. And I've been spoiled this last year with Premodern. I went on an amazing streak. I'm never going to get that lucky again, probably. And I think I got used to winning. And not making the top four felt like a big disappointment for where I felt I was at. So it was a nice, humbling experience that I can learn from. So I definitely appreciated that in hindsight once I got over that hump and what it did for me. So I wanted to shout out all the competitors I talked to afterwards. They were always just kind, win, lose, or draw. Well, no draw, but win, lose. So yeah, I think that's an awesome feature of this event as well.
Where that's good to hear. And to be fair, I mean, just so my perspective on this is
Right.
quite clear, it's okay to be upset if you lose, right? It's like the Indiana Jones and Last Crusade at the beginning of the prologue with when he's a kid and he's trying to preserve that artifact. The whole like it belongs in a museum argument, and they eventually catch him and get it back, and then the guy's like, "You lost today, kid. That doesn't mean you have to like it or whatever." It's important to learn from your mistakes if you made mistakes, and it's okay to be a little upset. It's just how you compose yourself and how you treat other people. It sucks to suck, but how you move forward, I think, is
no,
the more
I
important
would
piece.
agree with that. So the PSS as a whole was awesome. Everything was good. We had a worthy champion, a worthy finals. Everyone was worthy where they played. Awesome decks. So let's kind of, for what we can do, what takeaways from this PSS, either positive or negative? What was each of your biggest takeaways that you're going to carry into the next PSS when it occurs?
The biggest thing, I guess, the biggest change it was doing the ban versus rotation system. I think that's probably the most apparent thing that we learned, and we kind of already talked about that, so I don't think I need to go into too much detail. Um, we'd probably want to start it earlier in the season. I know, like my we kind of talked about my scheduling, which was mostly me. Okay. Okay.
No,
All right.
I was gone for half the week, Swipe.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. I
It's
know,
me.
like
It's
when
both of us. It's
when we
both
were
of
trying to
us.
schedule players, it's like, all right, I can do like this time on 2 days of the week for the next 2 weeks. And like, that's about it. And like, and so, yeah, just we would probably want to start earlier in the summer so that by fall, we'd be done. But I mean, beyond that, like I'm trying to think if there's been a lot of or like consistent feedback that I got. Nothing's jumping out to me in terms of or like lessons learned. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the production and how things run. So I other than those two things, nothing's like really jumping out to me. So
Awesome. No worries. Flint, anything for yourself? Ban land tax.
Ban land
well, I think
tax.
we solved that one.
I think that Mike and I will probably talk about this a little bit more as we go into the next series, but there are a number of things that we could consider. We could consider creating a format where, we do the 4 decks and, you have to play 3, or we could go back just to the ban system. We could keep the rotation. We could go back to the Robin rule where you can only play Cabal Therapy in one deck and Meddling Mage in one deck. Any card that takes advantage of, knowledge ahead of time. We got a mix, I would say, from people from this last series. Some people really liked it. Some people didn't like it, as much as the ban system. I think that what we want to consider some of those things as we go into the next series. And then, obviously just starting a little earlier would be the other thing. But I think it's a pretty well-oiled machine at this point, from the production side to reaching out to players, to getting it organized, to the communication. I don't think that there will be any major changes to the next series unless there's some kind of a major change to the format or to the meta. And I think we saw the biggest change that we're going to see for a while.
And it was definitely interesting to see. And that's one thing with Premodern being a closed format is it's hard to see a change in the meta sometimes. It's a rotation of decks and little ingenuities and things coming and fading. One thing that I kind of enjoyed is, and I don't know if it was intentional, but you guys had us have deck submissions in after LobsterCon. So we got to see LobsterCon play out, because that's the only reason I picked up Fluctuator. Is Flint, I saw your success with it. I saw what you did with it, and I thought it was really good. As I said, my only regret is I didn't practice enough with it to feel comfortable, or as comfortable as I could be. Yeah.
Well,
you were drinking all day.
I did well with it.
No.
No.
Oh well, fair enough.
Fair
enough. Well, maybe Dreadnought won't be around. I don't know. If that's fine. That's fine.
Last joke. You know I promise. Last
one. If you can let me have Wilt from a la whatever set it was, it's a green 2-mana color cycler that destroys artifacts. I will. Just put that into Premodern and then we'll play it. But I think having us register decks after a major tournament like that really was cool, because it showed us that land still was back. It showed us different things. It showed us innovations. And if you were looking for kind of the spikier field and decks, I think it's a cool thing to consider as you're putting things together and what you see, what new stuff can come out. I don't know how often that will line up, if it even lines up that well with now wanting to push it back earlier. It's all going to depend on how LobsterCon is, but that may have been an unintended cool thing that I saw that would be cool to repeat if it ever happened. I know it helped me to kind of gauge what I thought was going on. And we definitely saw that with the top 8 of LobsterCon and a lot of those same decks translated into the decks people brought with them. So I thought that was cool.
I think that's
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think that's fair, if I may jump in. And at the same point, I think there are just so many more
Right.
tournaments happening now, like
Exactly.
all the Misty Mountain tournaments, and then we just had the 1.5K tournament, which may not be as big as LobsterCon, but they're definitely going to bring in the kind
Mm-hmm.
of competitive people who will be repping,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, some pretty decent decks. And so, yeah, with if we did start earlier, we may not have the luxury
Mm-hmm.
of post LobsterCon intel, and at the same time, with the I use the
Mm-hmm.
word proliferation very loosely, given this is
Yeah, yeah,
such a
yeah.
niche format, in the larger scheme of things. But with the proliferation
Sure.
relative to maybe 3 years ago, pre-modern, um, I think that will mitigate some of
Awesome.
that
I think it's
issue
definitely worth
for what
something. It
it's
was
worth.
just a really cool aspect of this one that lined up in the stars. So going
Sure.
forward, obviously your internal discussions will be happening probably more towards the winterish side of things when schedules maybe calm down, if they have not already started already. What are If you had a dream for the PSS or something you'd love to add that could happen in the future? What are things you guys have thought of that are things that may show up, or they could be pie in the sky now? Who knows? Is there anything that you guys would love to accomplish that you have not tried yet, or just don't know how you could accomplish with this series?
I mean, I'm not unhappy with what will be accomplished or what will be
Mm-hmm.
done. I'm not trying to say that, but I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess I think of reaching a broader audience. I guess like if it were on a more mainstream channel or whatnot, just to expose pre-modern to more people. I thought that would be cool. But I mean, like, I don't even think that's needed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm happy with the number of people that tune in and watch it, and especially the people that are there are very dedicated, and I think those are the people that we're ultimately appealing to. But it would be cool, I guess, like if it got seen by more people. But I mean, like that's not something I'm worried about. I think it'll just come organically, or even if it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with it. But
Okay.
uh,
Awesome.
can you think of anything, Flint?
I don't know if I'm just like in a sassy mood tonight or what it is, but honestly, the first thing that came to mind when you said that was like strip pre-modern.
Let me work
Yeah.
out first.
Or something along those lines. Obviously,
You're
that's not
talking
going to
about
work.
just
But
people playing strip mine? Is that what you're saying?
uh,
Yeah.
no,
That
it's like
is.
strip poker, obviously. No, yeah.
I think we might have
I
to be
tried
real
strip mine in the
selective with
band
the
series.
people
It
that
was
we pick.
great, by the
Then,
way.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It was
yeah,
we had a handsome bunch this time. I don't know what you're talking about. This would
Yeah.
have been
That's because the
great.
clothes stayed on.
Um, people would have been very entertained. Um, no, I don't know. I mean, to just to echo what you said, Mike, I do think that it would be kind of cool if we had a larger viewership so we could kind of spread the pre-modern word a little bit. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that. We always want to, have more people join, the pre-modern community. And when more people join, it can alter the community itself, which I think has
Mm-hmm.
been kind of an ongoing discussion in some of the Facebook groups or Discord groups. I will just say that I think pre-modern growing is a good thing, and that's just part of any fun thing, gaining more followers and more community members. Um, but I don't know what that would
Okay.
look like necessarily at this point, right? Maybe there's a world where some other MTG streamers who are more well known decide, oh yeah, we want to check out this pre-modern, and they reach out to the Cloud Goat Ranger and say,
Mm-hmm.
I want to get involved in this. How can I do this? And we do a special series. I don't see that happening anytime soon
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a bit of a realist, but that would be cool if it did. And at the same time, one of the things that makes the PSS so great is we do have people in it who are part of the community already and do so much for it, like yourself. So there are trade-offs to that. But in general, I think that we've reached cruising altitude, and the series is going. It's trucking along just fine, and I'm excited to talk with Mike in the next couple of months about whom we might invite for the next one and what that might look like, and we'll just run it back.
Well, from my standpoint, I'm loving what's going on. I'm always a big dreamer, so I was talking a little bit with Mike and you beforehand of big dreams in the sky. So I got to temper expectations, but things I was on the selfish end, I would love if you did a redemption arc PSS. That would make me feel real good. But on a more yeah.
You've been promoting that pretty heavily.
I don't want a redemption at all. But on a serious note, though, I think what would be cool, because we are getting into season 6 now, pretty soon, I would love to see a winners PSS, like an PSS All Stars or something like that. I think that would be kind of cool for like a season, 9 when we get to it, because I don't think the PSS is going anywhere. From my knowledge, is like I think those sort of unique things every once in a while when the numbers line up are really cool. So that's my 2 cents on it.
We might even have to wait past 9 because there might be repeat champions. I would say we almost did.
True.
So
that's true. Well,
that could throw a wrench in it, but yeah, that is something to
absolutely.
Consider, yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, that's perfectly fair. But guys, is there anything else kind of before we go into my awesome questions that I always have that you guys want to say about the season? Any parting words? Last thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I'll say if people have a way of providing feedback, I'll probably put out some sort of poll or Google form for people to value. I do value people's opinions about stuff. I mean, I do consider that when we make changes or when we make decisions, and I do appreciate hearing the feedback from the people that watch. So if you guys do have suggestions or critique, I'm open to hearing that. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like we talk about this pretty much every episode, but like thanks for like the people that tune in. That I mean, like that it's way easier to do it when you feel like other people are getting excited about something that you're doing. It's not like we're just shouting into the open void. There are people that are excited for the PSS every week, or I love it when people talk about like, oh, this is like the production value of this is so good or whatnot. Like that's probably close to like the highest compliment that I feel like I can get when I do that. I do really appreciate those kind words. And then yeah, thanks for the players for being flexible and putting on a good show. But yeah, more of that. We've said it before, but I don't want it to be forgotten that yeah, I appreciate like all the support that we get for these. So
gotcha. Flint, how about yourself?
Samesies. Yeah.
Awesome.
More of the same.
Hey, on a positive note, I just checked. Our first half of this episode did survive. So yay! Huzzah! Let's go.
Huzzah.
All right, guys. Now this is the best part of the podcast. Obviously, it's why it's named this way. It's I do have questions for you, and specifically, you two have done this before, but we've seen some changes in Premodern. You remember the 3 questions are: what is your most overrated, most underrated, and the card that needs to be broken currently or should be broken currently in Premodern. Mike, we're going to start with you for the first one. What is the most overrated card?
I already know what I'm going to say for all 3 of these, so I don't know if Flint needs some time to think. But I mean, I don't remember if I've done this before on the podcast, so I apologize if I'm repeating an answer I said before. But for overrated, and I don't think I think other people might have talked about this on the podcast, but I think Phyrexian Arena is overrated. Someone made a statement about it that it's like, oh, assuming you're not Dark Ritualing it out, which, I mean, some decks that play Phyrexian Arena had been cutting Dark Ritual from it anyways. So assuming that we're playing it on turn 3, you're spending turn 3, not getting anything out of it then, passing the turn, drawing a card so that it's finally replaced itself. So, and then on the 5th turn is when it's like finally paid off. and you've lost 2 life, and you're up a card, and you spent the 3 mana.
Yeah.
And like, there's just a lot of situations where like that is just not good enough in a ton of matchups. And so I think people have just put Fire Extinction Arena in the main deck of a lot of their decks, and I don't even know if it needs to be in, like, I'm talking about, maybe you sideboard it, maybe you don't even play it at all. And so I think Fire Extinction Arena is a little bit overrated. So
Okay, awesome. Flint, how about you? Scroll Rack overrated.
I would say
It's really
it did get
bad
worse.
without
So
land
I
tax.
don't
I
know.
would
It
agree.
That's
did
fair.
get.
Well, people are still trying to play it.
People
I would
figured
say
that
like
out.
that was, if you saw some of the decks.
Yeah, they're still putting it in like
Mhm.
Sylvan Library decks and stuff and Oath decks. I don't know. Any card in the Rock would be my other snarky answer, I think, because I just don't like the Rock, much to Michael's chagrin. Most overrated card, probably Natural Order
Okay.
would be my guess. I know it's made a splash recently in Elves lists, and there's Natural Order Rock, but I mean, they said it not. They said on the Spike Colony, right? Like the best creature you can get in those decks is Verdant Force, and Verdant Force just kind of sucks. Yeah, you can get blown out by a Multani or maybe a Verdant Force or whatever, but I just don't think it's the road that a lot of these decks should be going down. I'm probably wrong about that. I'm sure people will prove me wrong, but just the decks that I have seen with that
All
have
right.
not really impressed
Well,
me
then,
very
Flint, we're going to
much.
keep it with you. What is the most underrated card right now, in your opinion?
I think that I'm gonna die on this hill because the last time I was on your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
I think I just said basic swamp. And I just really want to see black decks make a comeback. It just makes me so sad that zombies and suicide black and some of these other archetypes just have not made the resurgence yet, at least in
Mm-hmm.
some of the bigger tournaments that we've seen. Um, I would really like to see someone do well with like a
Mm-hmm.
mono black control deck or a mono black aggro deck or a combo deck or whatever, right? I would
Mm-hmm.
love to see that. So I'm actually going to keep my
Mm-hmm.
same answer from before, just from the
Make
perspective
swamp.
of make
I
swamp
mean, I
great
agree with
again.
you. A couple notes on that one is MTGO, the MOS series, has some pretty cool black decks floating around. A black control deck, Suicide Black's been around their zombies. People are working on it, so have hope in your heart. People are working on it. The combo part of
Please,
it
someone
is going to be, unless
come
you
to my
want to play
rescue.
Doomsday somehow, Mr. Berlin is going to have to feel something in his heart to let one of the goodies on the ban list in black come off of it. Like, just one of them. I love tendrils. It's not going to happen. I know. But one of the goodies has to come off.
We got to get Necro. I mean, did you like did a
No, I
Necro
don't
deck
even think
even
it's.
win Necro
I
Summer,
don't
or
even
did
think it's in the
Dreadnought just
finals.
stomp all over it?
I will disagree. I hard disagree that Necro should be unbanned. I don't know. Okay, hold on.
Someone
There,
will break it. I know someone will break it. I know, but come
Give us
on,
bargain then.
give us
the
something.
Or
thing,
Will.
like,
Sorry, Will.
No.
assuming that Necro resolves, like, how are you profitably killing it? Like, you disenchant it and they just draw 6 cards. It's like, oh, great, nice disenchant. Or like I don't know, like that doesn't. Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't
Sounds
know, because
amazing.
I mean, as a
I used to play Yawgmoth's Bargain in my rock deck. Like, I would have one copy of that because I would just be able to, like, okay, get to the point where I like have 6 mana. I'm going to cast this card and just exchange life for cards, and it doesn't matter what my opponent, if they eventually deal with it, because I got a huge advantage out of that exchange. And like, it's just
yeah,
way easier to do that with Necro. So I don't think
yeah.
that card should be a ban. But
You are probably right. You are probably
well, but
right,
I just
and I'm
know,
being
like,
a little
there are a
facetious.
lot of people.
But
There are a lot of people who have
black
said,
is
like, who jumped on that unbanned Necro, and I don't think it's a good idea. But
I mean,
and for what it's worth, the decks that like ran Necro, I don't think we're necessarily sort of using it in a way where
Mhm.
it would maximize its potential, right? Like I think it could be a dreadnought scenario in a lot of situations where you
Mhm.
do put it in another deck just to kind of boost it from that card advantage perspective. But we don't need to
Yeah,
get
if you're
into a
looking,
ban list discussion here. Basic Swamp is my
yeah,
answer.
yes, and if you're looking
Make
for a
it great
ban
again,
list discussion,
please.
check out the episode Premodcast did with Mike Arnold recently on Spotify about the ban list. Really informative, well thought out arguments there. So go ahead and check that one out. Shout out to those guys and Mike Harris, who won a nice little tournament earlier this month. So Mr. Michael Heup, what is your most underrated card right now?
I am going to go with Rofellos. It's like a card that I don't know if I've seen
Oh,
anyone play in pre-modern, and it definitely is like powerful enough. I mean, like going from 2 to 5 is pretty powerful. So like, I feel like there's some space where you could do some things with Rofellos, and I really haven't seen anyone do it. So that gets my pick.
okay, awesome, awesome. And then card that needs to be broken or should be broken that has not been yet. Mr. Michael Hoyp, you get the pleasure of this one first.
So I mean, I don't know. Like it's been a while since I played like combo decks. People think of me as the rock guy, but I do also have a great love for Storm. And one of the cards that I have built multiple decks with is Hunting Pack. So the 7 mana
Yes.
instant, make a 4/4 or Storm. Um, that card, I think, actually lines up like pretty well against a lot of the strategies if you can get to the mid to late game and are like doing some kind of acceleration. Um, Surprise 4/4s, I think, could be um, quite potent in a lot of situations. So I'll say Hunting Pack.
Absolutely. I'm actually on board. I have things that have been floating around. We've talked a little bit
Yep.
about this, and you know, okay, don't give me black cards. Give me Mind's Desire. Mind's Desire is okay. That's fine. Um, Stop shaking your head, Flint. Um,
Just let it
fine.
go.
Just
Let
keep
it
playing
go.
my
Well,
crappy red decks in stasis. Let's go. Um, Flint, what about you? What is your card that should be or needs to be broken?
I mean, I've got just a lot of terrible cards on my short list. I think I've probably talked about some of these before, but I'd love to see a recycle deck do well. I'd love to see uh, what's the green
Drake.
channel Day of Dragons or
Yes.
whatever. I'd love to see that like in like a blue green deck do well. I've messed around with like collective unconscious, tried to break that. Um, some of those like go big cards. I'd love to see do well or be broken in
I love it. I
some
love it.
regard.
All right, guys. Well, we have spent a great time together. Congratulations on another successful PSS. It was a pleasure to participate in and a pleasure to watch. We are all waiting on, you know, everything on the world to see when the next one is, what's going to be in it, who's going to be in it. I'm sure you will tell us in due time. So, with that being said, everybody go ahead and make sure you follow the Cloud Goat Rancher on Twitch. He is going to be doing coverage at Misty Mountains tournament, the Fall Cup, this Saturday. So that's going to be happening. Check him and Brian Kowal out in the booth with Ben Rasmussen. I think is also going to be there doing some commentary. Um, Flint, you seem to come and go from the shadows, but every time you come, you seem to win or top eight a tournament with something nobody expects. So there's no, I don't know if there's any real socials, Flint, that you keep up with for Magic at all, but we just see you kind of when you come out of the brewing laboratory. Um, but guys, the PSS was amazing. Thank you for sharing your time with me today. And for everybody watching, you can find Premodern anywhere. I can't run down the list anymore of places you can find it. Google Premodern, you're going to find something. Come enjoy the format if it's going to be your main format or if it's just going to be a palate cleanser for modern and whatever else you play. It's accessible to all. So everybody have a wonderful night. Take care. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Will.